Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. She dared treat an alien baby wolf and lost her job the next day. She didn't believe who came to visit. The sterile hum of the Galactic Medical Center filled the empty halls as Nurse Mara finished her rounds. The soft glow of the overhead lights cast long shadows, and the distant beeping of life monitors in the patient wards gave her a sense of routine, of stability. But tonight, something felt off. She had worked the night shift for years, tending to humans and aliens alike, patching up wounds from bar fights, space mining accidents, and the occasional high-speed hover chase gone wrong. It was a life she had embraced, a life of purpose, but purpose didn't pay the bills. Mara exhaled as she leaned against the nurse's station, rubbing her eyes. Her contract renewal had been delayed for months, and rumors were swirling about budget cuts, stricter policies, and, worst of all, layoffs. She wasn't naive. If there was a calling, the ones who pushed the rules too often would be the first to go, and she had a habit of bending those rules when it came to saving lives. A soft whimper broke through her thoughts. Mara froze. The sound was faint, barely noticeable over the quiet hum of the facility. Her heart picked up pace as she scanned the dim corridor, looking for the source. Another weak whimper pained her. Her hands instinctively reached for her medkit as she followed the sound down a side hallway, one that led to the restricted waste disposal area. Her stomach twisted. No patient should be back here, no one should. Her breath caught when she saw, though, a small trembling figure lay curled against the cold metal floor, barely more than a lump of silver-white fur, a pup. Mara's heart clenched. It wasn't just any pup, it was an alien wolf pup, a species known as Vurin, rumored to be incredibly intelligent yet rarely seen in medical facilities like this. Even in the dim light, she could see the pup's frail body, the way its tiny ribs protruded, the unnatural shuddering of its breathing. It was sick, dying, and someone had dumped it here. She swallowed hard, kneeling beside it. "Hey there, little one," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The pup didn't move at first, but then, with a flicker of life, its ears twitched and slowly its dull golden eyes cracked open, a silent plea, a last desperate hope. Mara knew the rules. Unregistered alien species were to be reported, not treated. The medical center didn't waste resources on creatures they weren't authorized to care for. It was cruel, but it was protocol. Her fingers hovered over her emergency communicator. She should call it in, let security handle it, let the system decide. But then the pup let out the softest, weakest cry, a sound so fragile, so desperate, that it sliced straight through her chest. Mara took a slow breath, then made her choice. She scooped up the trembling creature and vanished into the dark. Mara moved fast, keeping her footsteps light as she carried the pup through the back corridors of the facility. Her pulse pounded in her ears, her mind racing through the risks she was taking. If she got caught, if anyone found out, her career would be over. But none of that mattered right now. She slipped into an unused exam room, locking the door behind her before placing the pup gently onto the sterile table. It barely reacted. Its body was limp, weak, its fur damp with sweat, its fever dangerously high. Mara's instincts took over. She grabbed a scanner and ran it over the tiny form, reading the data as fast as it streamed onto the display. Heart rate unstable, oxygen levels low, fever 106. 4. Diphosm climbing. Her stomach tightened. It wouldn't last much longer. Grabbing a vial of antipyretics, she adjusted the dosage. Too much could shut down its system, too little wouldn't do anything. She prepped the injection, her hand steady despite the tension twisting through her chest. "This might sting, little guy," she murmured, pressing the needle into its thin skin. The pup let out the faintest whimper but didn't resist. Mara bit her lip. It was too weak to fight. She worked quickly, checking its hydration levels before setting up a fluid line to ensure the pup got enough electrolytes. Next, she grabbed a damp cloth and gently pressed it to its forehead, cooling its fevered body. Minutes passed, then an hour. She stayed with it, watching, waiting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she felt the smallest change. The pup's trembling lessened, its breathing grew steadier, the fever, once burning hot, began to fade. Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You're going to make it," she whispered. The tiny creature stirred, its golden eyes fluttered open again, clearer this time, and for the first time, it looked at her not just with pain but with recognition. A connection formed in that moment, something silent and unbreakable. A knock banged against the door. Mara froze. The door lock beeped, someone was overriding the access code. Panic shot through her veins, then the door slid open, and standing there, face cold as stone, was Chief Administrator Didnt. Mara's stomach dropped, her fate was sealed. The silence in the room was suffocating. Mara stood frozen, her hand still resting on the small, trembling form of the alien wolf pup. The glow of the overhead monitors flickered against the sharp angles of Chief Administrator Didnt's face, casting her in a shadow that made the moment feel heavier than it already was. The older woman's expression was unreadable, but the rigid set of her shoulders and the way her eyes locked onto Mara's hands told her everything she needed to know. There was no talking her way out of this. Didnt stepped forward, her sharp heels clicking against the sterile floor. The door behind her slid shut, sealing them inside. "I would ask if I should be surprised," she said coolly, "but that would be a waste of breath, wouldn't it?" Mara's pulse thundered in her ears, but she kept her voice steady. "It is dying," Didnt exhaled through her nose, as if she had expected this answer. "That is not your decision to make, Nurse Mara, you know the regulations." Mara gritted her teeth. "The regulations that say we should let a living creature suffer." She gestured at the pup, still weak but no longer burning with fever. "I don't care what species it is, I wasn't going to watch it die." Didnt's gaze flickered to the pup, her lips pressing into a thin line. You weren't heartless, Mara thought, knowing that much, but she was a woman of rules, a woman of unwavering adherence to protocol. You've put me in a difficult position, Didnt said finally. Mara's throat tightened, she could see where this was going. You don't have to report this, she said carefully. No one else knows. I'll take it off station myself, make sure it gets somewhere safe. It's already been reported. The words hit her like a blow to the chest. Mara's hands curled into fists, anger flickering beneath her panic. By whom? Security cameras don't lie. Didnt folded her arms. And neither does your record. You've always had a problem with bending the rules. This was simply the final straw. Mara opened her mouth, but no words came. It didn't matter if she argued, it didn't matter if the pup was alive now, breathing, recovering, the system didn't care. Didnt's voice softened just slightly. You're an excellent nurse, one of the best we've had, but you made your choice, and you knew what the consequences would be. Mara swallowed hard, her stomach twisting. You're dismissing me, she whispered. Didnt gave a small, almost regretful nod. Effective immediately, she continued, Mara. The rest was a blur, something about formalities, about her contract being terminated, about security escorting her from the premises. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the pup on the table, looking at her with wide golden eyes, as if it somehow understood what was happening. And then, just like that, she was escorted from the only place she had ever belonged. The station's artificial daylight bathed the streets in a warm glow, but it felt cold to Mara. She walked numbly through the main district, a bag slung over her shoulder, her medical ID stripped from her uniform. Every step carried her farther from the Galactic Medical Center, the place she had poured her entire life into. She should have fought harder, should have said something, but what would have changed? She had saved a life, and for that, she had been cast out. Her feet carried her toward a familiar spot, a small cafe nestled between two towering market buildings. She had come here after long shifts, back when she was exhausted but fulfilled, when saving lives still felt like a calling rather than a crime. She sank onto a bench outside, rubbing her hands over her face. She had no plan, no future, and worst of all, she had left the pup behind. It was in the system's hands now, and she had no way of knowing whether it would be cared for or abandoned all over again. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. All this time, she had believed in something greater than herself. She had believed in the idea of medicine, of healing, of duty, but duty to what? To a system that discarded compassion when it was inconvenient? She clenched her jaw. No, she wasn't going to let this break her. Her career was over, that much was clear, but her instincts weren't something they could strip away. And if the universe thought she was going to just sit here and accept it, a sudden knock against the metal cafe railing startled her. Mara's head snapped up. A figure stood before her, towering, clad in flowing dark fabric that shimmered under the artificial sunlight. Their face was partially hidden by a deep hood, but their eyes, golden and piercing, burned with something unrateable. Adyar. Harry, one of the highborn alien races rarely seen in human districts, known for their immense power and influence. Mara's breath caught in her throat, she had never spoken to one before. The Drari tilted their heads slightly, studying her as though seeing something no one else could. "You are Mara, the healer," they said, their voice smooth, deliberate. Mara hesitated. Was the Jakari making a soft, knowing sound? Then slowly, they extended their arm, revealing what they carried beneath their cloak. Mara's heart stopped. Curled in their arms, wrapped in a silken covering, was the pup, the very same alien wolf she had risked everything for. Its golden eyes blinked up at her, no longer dull with fever but filled with a familiar warmth. Mara couldn't breathe. "You saved what others abandoned," the Drari said, "and now the child's bloodline wishes to offer you something in return." Mara's mind reeled. Bloodline. She looked between the alien noble and the pup, something wild and impossible forming in her chest. "What exactly are you saying?" she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The Drari stepped closer, lowering their hood. Their features were regal, sharp, powerful, but not unkind. "You are no longer a nurse of the Galactic Medical Center," they said. "You are something much greater." Mara stared, the weight of their words crashing over her, and for the first time since she had walked out of that clinic, she felt something new, hope. The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Mara's gaze remained locked on the tiny creature wrapped in the Drari noble's arms. The pup had grown stronger, its fur was no longer damp with fever, its eyes no longer clouded with exhaustion. It was awake, aware, watching her with the same quiet recognition it had shown in the clinic. Her chest tightened. "How did you get it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Drari noble tilted their head, studying her with those golden eyes that seemed to see past flesh and bones, straight into the soul. "It was never theirs to discard," they said simply. "It was never yours to claim." Mara clenched her jaw. "I wasn't trying to claim anything. I was trying to save it." A flicker of something, approval, amusement, crossed the Dar's face. "Yes," they murmured, "and in doing so, you have already changed its fate." They took a step closer, lowering their voice. "Tell me, healer, do you know what you have done?" Mara swallowed, her mind racing. "I broke the law. I lost my career. And yet," the Dari said, "you have gained something far greater." They extended the pup toward her. For a moment, Mara hesitated. She had fought so hard to keep this little life from slipping away, had risked everything to protect it. Now it was here, safe, warm, offered back to her by hands that should have never intervened. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. The pup let out a soft, familiar whimper as she pulled it against her chest, its small body pressing close, its tiny heartbeat thrumming against her own. Mara inhaled sharply. "It is real. It is alive. I saved it." The Drari noble let the silence linger before speaking again. "You saved more than just a creature," they said, their voice softer now. "You saved the heir of a noble bloodline, and for that, the house of Tur is in your debt." Mara's breath hitched as she looked up, her heart pounding. The house of air, the noble inclined their head. This child was never just a stray, they murmured. It was stolen, discarded as a political move, left to die in the hands of those who would see its lineage erased. Their gaze darkened. And yet, because of you, it did not. Mara's grip on the pup tightened. The truth hit her like a thunderstrike. This wasn't just an abandoned creature, this was royalty. The weight of the revelation settled over her like a storm. Mara had spent her whole life believing in the system, in the order of things. She had trusted that medicine, healing, and kindness were enough, that if she just followed the rules, she could make a difference. But the rules had left this pup to die, and now the universe had turned upside down. She looked at the noble, her mind spinning. Why are you telling me this? Because, the Drari said, you are the only reason this child lives, and for that, you are owed more than just gratitude. Mara shook her head. I don't, she exhaled sharply. I don't need a reward. I didn't do this for, perhaps not, the noble interrupted gently.